Hello everyone, this is the second portion of Chapter 1, which is about theories of development. Okay, so here's an overall table of who we'll be talking about. Some will be talked about more than others. So we have the psychosexual theory with Freud, psychosocial with Erikson, cognitive with Piaget, sociocultural with Vygotsky, attachment, Bowlby and Ainsworth, ecological systems theory, Bronfenbrenner, and then we'll also talk about behaviorism and social learning theory. Now, after today, we will not talk about Freud again, but we will constantly mention Erikson, Piaget, Vygotsky, Bowlby and Ainsworth, and Bronfenbrenner. Also, behaviorism is not going to be covered again, and social learning theory. So again, I provide this information for you because you are welcome to connect to any theories in your assignments. But I also wanted to make it clear that these will be the ones that are primarily concentrated on so that you don't spend a lot of time learning the other ones where we don't really utilize them within our assignments. Okay, so Freud. One thing I want to say is don't really worry about the the years of, birth and death. I just want you to be aware of when they were relevant. So Freud, again, the mid-1800s to 1900s. He had a private practice and he specialized in therapy. He would meet with people and try to get to the root of their problems. Most of the times they would come in with things like hysteria or nervous disorders. Excuse me, and we would refer to that maybe now as anxiety. But he would hypnotize his patients. And he would have them recall important things that happened to them when they were young. So he, talked about the ego, the superego, all of those. Again, I'm not going to really concentrate on those. But he felt you had to recall things from your past to understand your current problems. Whatever is happening to you now as an adult is due to something in your past. And that was really a new concept. I need to deal with past issues to understand my current issues. And now it seems to make sense, if you have unresolved issues. But he was the first one coming about saying, your childhood is extremely important because it molds who you become as an adult. He was also our first stage theorist who said, look, we develop in these very specific stages. So when we are an adult and we have an issue, we can go back to that stage and work on whatever issues it is that we have. So here's his stages. And again, you may have heard of Freud before and know that his stages have a very sexual connotation with them. That is true. He talked about things like Oedipus complex, being attracted to your parents when you're young, those kind of things. But it's deeper than that. Think about, what does a child from birth to 1 year do in the oral stage? They're putting everything in their mouth in order to understand their surroundings. He believed the anal stage was a time of control, learning how to use the toilet. And so children, and, that power struggle with your parents of gaining control and independence. The phallic stage is a stage of exploration and being interested in the opposite sex and your own sex. So think about 3 to 6 year olds. They ask a lot of questions. Why is a girl this way? Why is a boy this way? Then they get to that stage of latency, which means calm. So during those, elementary years, they tend to not be overly interested in, relationships. It's more about friendships and just kind of having a period of calm. But then we're back into that genital stage in adolescence when, again, we are very interested in relationships, making connections, and understanding our own sexual messages. So Freud was a teacher of Erikson. And again, Erikson is going to be one of those major ones that we talk about consistently throughout the term. So if you look, he was born a little bit later than Freud and lived primarily through the 1900s. His background, he studied under Freud, and so he had that influence about stages, and he decided to be a lifespan theorist. I'm going to continue from adolescence and go through adulthood. He didn't have a college degree, but he really observed different cultures, different family systems, and studied the development of how we become who we are. How we go through our childhood makes us who we are. And so he was really interested in the different portions of childhood and how we go through our experiences. So we had 8 stages. You will be responsible for the first 5 because that's up through adolescence. But within each stage, a psychosocial conflict is experienced. And we're going to talk about that in detail when we get to his first stage. But it basically means that you go through a conflict in every stage. The first one being trust versus mistrust. You have this biological connection to either going through that stage positively or negatively based on your experiences, your parenting, caregiving. And again, it can be a positive outcome where you develop trust, or maybe a not so positive outcome where you develop mistrust. That conflict is something everyone goes through, according to Erikson. It's very biologically based, and we all go through the same sequence of stages, but behavior is dictated by culture. So again, going through the same sequence of stages maybe sounds like one course of development. But different from Freud, Erikson took culture into account. So again, I'm going to restate that, but Freud did not take culture into account. Erikson added that component to his theory. So one major difference between Erikson and Freud is that Erikson takes culture into account in his stage theory. So here's his stages, and again, you are only responsible up to adolescence, so you don't need to worry about the 3 adulthood stages. But you see how everyone is designed to represent that conflict. Trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt, positive versus negative. And here you can see that's where I was saying, he takes the 3-year-old versus 2-year-old, but he's 6 to 11, and again, adolescence is 11 to 18. So we will go into detail on Erikson every time we get to a social and emotional chapter. All right, Piaget, again, lived around the same time as Erikson. He was trained in biology, so he was educated. I want to say at 9 years old, they asked him to be a curator of a museum, but, he hadn't gone through high school yet, so he had to turn it down. But he was interested in how do animals adapt to their environment? And what was great about that interest is he applied that to humans. So how do we adapt? When we're born, when we experience things, when we experience something new, how do we take in that information and adapt so that we can understand it? He studied his own children, which was a criticism of his account. Of his theory, but they felt that it could be generalized to most of the population. And he was alive a long time, so he was able to go back and update his theory. He concentrated on memory in his last decade of work. But again, the textbooks haven't even really begun to understand that or even print it yet. So we're just going to concentrate on his traditional theory. So Erikson believed that children actively construct their own knowledge as they manipulate and explore their world. What does that mean? Children are active participants. They engage with things. That's where you may have heard of a phrase called hands-on learning. That's very Piagetian. He believed that we have to actually engage in our learning for it to sink in. So we actively construct our own knowledge. We don't just sit back like a sponge. We actually have to engage and explore. And we do that through manipulation. Again, hands-on learning. He was the first one came about who said, children are not just miniature adults. They understand very differently. Their thinking is very different. And so we're going to look at, when we look at his 4 stages, how thinking changes over time for young children. Here are his stages: sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational. And again, because he has only 4 stages up to adolescence, or really he goes onward, that's where the difference is from Erickson. So he stops at 2 and considers 2 to 7 early childhood. One thing I do want to say again is he believed that once you reach this final formal operational stage of thinking, there is no higher level. So whether you're 11, 25, 35, 55, 85, 105, you are at that same level of thinking. And again, that was a criticism of his theory also, was how could an 11-year-old be the same, excuse me, as, an 80-year-old. But for him, it was all about your thinking process. So now, again, you can stop here and go back to Blackboard and view the video on Piaget, or you could just continue on and go back and watch the video later. Okay, so Piaget was a cognitive theorist. So is Vygotsky. Born the same year as Piaget, but died a lot sooner. So a little bit about him was he did read Piaget's work. But he was Russian, and so he had a very different background than Piaget did. His was more about collectivism. It's not about you as an individual. It's about what you can contribute to others. So it wasn't really all about striving for autonomy or striving for independence. It was more about, working together as a group and learning from others. So he did read Piaget's work, and what's great about their theories is combined, they're a great approach to cognitive development, because they both concentrate on different areas that the other one doesn't necessarily include. I think this may have cut off some information, so let's see if it's on the next page. Okay, well, we'll just keep going. So don't let the name of his theory fool you. Sociocultural makes you think, okay, it's just going to be in the social and emotional chapters. But no, it's really cognitive. Oops, sorry about that. Cognitive. Okay, so he focuses on how culture is transmitted from one generation to the next. How do we teach our youth about where we came from, about how to live in this society? Well, he believed children are inherently social. We're born social. And he, just like Piaget, believed we're very active in our development. We have to engage and interact in order for us to learn cognitively. And for him, cognitive development is very social. We really don't learn unless we're in that social environment. And when we get to another future chapter, we'll talk about the zone of proximal development and how he really believed we learn new facts and contribute to old facts. Okay, let's see. It's kind of all broken up here. Okay. Sorry, ignore that down there. That shouldn't be there. There should be a picture there. But ethology. So ethology is the study of animal behavior. And, you've probably heard of things like survival behavior, evolutionary theory, excuse me, Darwinism, survival of the fittest. What helps one species of animal survive versus another? So that was the study done by a lot of other theorists. Well, the concept of imprinting by Lorenz, excuse me, was why do baby birds follow their mothers? Well, they stay close to ensure their survival. So imprinting is something born within baby birds to know that, oh, I better stay close to my caregiver, otherwise I may not survive. And again, it's not even something they think about, it's something that just automatically happens. So attachment theorists look at imprinting and thought, what do baby humans do in order to maintain their survival? Bowlby was one of those theorists, and again, around the same time as Piaget, Erikson, Vygotsky, and he was interested in, again, imprinting, but also, like Freud, early experiences he felt really influenced later experiences. The type of parenting we have, the type of parents, is going to affect all of our future relationships. You know, if we grow up and our parents are so nurturing and loving, we start to understand that that's how relationships are. And we try to establish those type of loving and supportive relationships with other people. But think about children who maybe have very strained relationships or who have been abused, ignored, humiliated. They're going to maybe get into future relationships and maybe allow others to treat them that way because that's how they feel they should be treated. Or maybe they start to treat others that way because, again, that's how they've learned to form relationships. What we know is early social attachment is crucial for normal development. Again, like I explained, if we don't have positive experiences as young children, it really affects our future relationships. So Bowlby decided rather than, concentrating on animals, he was going to concentrate on the human infant caregiver relationship. He looked at how attachment develops, so you can see his very biologically based system here. He felt that at these given ages, we were going through these phases of attachment. First, we go through pre-attachment, where we're not really attached. But by the time we're 2 years old, we know how to form reciprocal or two-way relationships. So we'll talk about this much more in Chapter 7. Now, there's also a video for you to watch on Blackboard about Mary Ainsworth. Now, she was a studier of Bowlby and thought his theory was great. He really broke down how we develop our attachment. But Ainsworth noticed there's very different styles of attachment. She could look at one mother and child and see a very strong relationship, and then look at another mother and child and maybe see something very strained or very uncomfortable. So she wanted to categorize how we form our attachments. She believed that there was one style of secure, and then all the other styles were considered insecure styles of attachment. We might be avoidant with our caregivers, we might be resistant, or we might even be disorganized, disoriented. And again, we will talk about this Chapter 7. So please go on. Here's the imprinting picture here of the baby birds following their mother. So that picture is not supposed to be on this slide. But now you can go back to Blackboard if you want. Again, you can stop here or just continue and go back later and watch the video about the strange situation. So Ainsworth would put children into a laboratory setting, basically a room with toys, somewhere to sit, a comfortable environment, and would put children through all of these different experiences, or what they called episodes, to see how the child reacts to their caregiver, how they react to a stranger, how they react when they're alone, how they react when the caregiver comes back. So you're going to see all of that displayed in the video. Now, I'm going to go ahead and stop here just because the video is getting kind of long, and then you'll need to come in and continue part 2 of the Chapter 1 theory PowerPoint video.